Hello everyone and welcome to lesson 4 module 2 of this full stack development class. And in our previous lesson 3 we looked at the binary number system of a computer, and in this particular lesson we want to look at the code execution flow. And therefore let's look at what happens when we write code up to the point where we get the output. So programming, we said, is giving instructions to a computer so that it can be able to perform some specific task. Without such instructions, then the computer cannot be able to do any task. So what normally happens is that we have the programmer or a software engineer who writes the code in form of instructions using some programming language, and then this code is given to the computer executes or runs that code, and we are able to see the output or the result given out. So these instructions are written using some high-level programming languages. An example of these high-level programming languages includes the Java programming language. For example, we have the JavaScript, we have Python, and we have so many other etc. Programming languages. So we use this programming language to write these instructions, and when these instructions are written, before the computer can be able to execute it, the computer cannot directly understand these high-level languages, these human-readable high-level programming languages. So what needs to be done is that these instructions must be translated into a machine language in form of zeros and ones, so that now the computer can be able to understand it and execute it. So the instructions must be translated to binary zeros and ones. So this high level instructions code must be translated into a machine language, and below is the steps that is taken when code is being executed. So let's look at the next slide and see the steps that normally happen before the code is executed. So when you write the code in some high level programming language, that code is called the source code in high level languages. And then this source code will then be saved and stored on as a file on some storage device, most likely the hard disk on your computer. And when you run that program, I mean, so once you run that program, what normally happens is that the operating system will load that program from where it is stored into the RAM or the random access memory, which is the computer memory. So the operating system will load the code from the storage device into the random access memory, and then the translation happens from there. So the translation to machine code within the CPU, what happens is that the CPU does not understand the source code directly, so the translation can be done in two ways. So we have two types of translation, we can say. So we have compiler, we have the compiled languages, and then we have the interpreted languages. So if the language you have used in writing your program is a compiled language, for example the C++ or C and other compiled languages, what will happen is that we'll have a tool within your computer called the compiler. So the compiler will translate the entire program into a machine code before running it. And for the interpreted languages, for example the JavaScript and the Python, the source code, the interpreter or the runtime, for example the Node.js and the browser, these are the interpreters. What will happen is that these interpreted languages, the interpreter will translate code line by line into a machine code or in zeros and ones. After the translation has happened, then the execution will be done by the CPU, and after the execution we are going to see the results, or the outputs is going to be generated. And once the program is done execution, then the program is going to stop or to terminate. Right? So these are the few steps that are taken once the program is written and run. So the program is written in high level language, saved in a storage device. During running, it's loaded into the RAM, and then the translation is done by the compiler, which compiles the entire program before it runs it, or the interpreted language, which interprets the code line by line into machine code, and then the execution happens, and finally the output is given out, and then finally the program is terminated. With that said, that's all about this particular lesson, and see you in the next lesson. Thank you for joining.